The earthquake that shook Charleston, South Carolina in 1886 was devastating. The number of casualties is said to have been at least 60, with some saying up to 100, and many people were also severely injured. The entire town was nearly leveled, and the seismic waves were said to have been felt far and wide. However, it is the cause of the earthquake that continues to intrigue scientists today. Let's start at the beginning, though, shall we? Charleston, South Carolina, 1886. Imagine this. It's the last day of August. It's just 20 years after the end of the Civil War, and the city is still recovering. Tensions are finally starting to lessen. Charleston had also experienced 2 hurricanes the year before, and thus was also attempting to recover from those as well. The region is in the middle of an intense and sweltering heat wave. Because of it, people who normally would have been winding down for the day at 10 p.m. are out and about, at church, shopping, at the movie theater, and generally in places they wouldn't normally be. Then disaster strikes. Everything begins to shake and crumble around them. People scream and scramble. Religious figures of the community are running outside, telling everyone it's the end of the world, while the quake stays strong for almost a minute. By the time it stops, Charlestonians' worlds have turned upside down. They gathered in the streets, now covered in the white dust that had accumulated in the air from the crumbling of walls and homes. Nobody could have guessed the events that would follow throughout the next few decades as a result of this catastrophe. People were forced to be on the street for weeks, living in close proximity to one another in quickly worsening conditions. They began to take a toll on the people, bringing out the worst behavior and attitudes. People began to segregate, and those of richer status took advantage and were treated better than people of color and those of lower socioeconomic status. Eventually, even after the town really began to recover from the disaster, the negative social conditions intensified, resulting in the death of an activist and ultimately propelling Charleston into the adoption of Jim Crow laws. Now, let's get to the science of the event. The thing about this earthquake is that it wasn't due to tension between plates, as plate tectonics theory supposes about earthquakes. The Charleston earthquake of 1886 was what is known today as an intraplate earthquake. These types of earthquakes occur, obviously, within the plates themselves, and their sources are still a bit mysterious. These kinds of quakes typically occur along fault lines and are nearly impossible to predict. They are relatively rare, though, which is fortunate for us since they tend to be extremely strong. The Charleston quake had a magnitude of around 7.3, and it caught people by surprise, not only due to its intensity, but also due to the fact that there hadn't really been many earthquakes in the area before. Since this earthquake, many small ones occur relatively often, definitely contributing to the way that the 1886 earthquake shaped the geosphere. Now, we know more about these types of intraplate earthquakes than we did before, and seismologists are working on ways to figure out how to prepare for them. While the climate wasn't changed, the landscape was a bit altered. This was mainly found in the immediate vicinity of the quake's origin. There were small craters and fissures in the earth in the main region of the shock. Trees also were swayed, and shifts in the soil and sediment were observed. The effects were regional, as some felt slight tremors in Tennessee, Mississippi, New York, and even Cuba. This earthquake involved the hydrosphere, biosphere, and the lithosphere. Scientists learned a lot from this earthquake, and many new ideas were introduced and some old ones thrown out. This would include the shrinking Earth theory. The scientific community began to measure and pay closer attention to earthquakes during the years that followed.